First contact, first blood. The galactic Concordat had known peace for so long that the very concept of war existed only in historical archives. 17 species, each more ancient than the last, had built a civilization spanning 3 spiral arms of the Milky Way. Their ships were marvels of engineering, elegant crystal and light constructions that sailed between stars on waves of manipulated space-time. The Concordat's oldest member, the Eldinar, had achieved spaceflight when humans were still perfecting agriculture. Their youngest, the Tholians, had joined nearly 1,000 years before humanity stumbled onto the galactic stage. And then there were humans. Earth had been discovered quite by accident when a Concordat survey vessel detected unusual radiation signatures from a previously uninvestigated yellow star. What they found both fascinated and disturbed them. A young species barely 3 centuries into their interstellar era, yet with ships that bristled with weapon emplacements and defensive systems. The humans called them battleships, a term that required extensive translation work, as the Concordat had no equivalent concept in their modern lexicon. They're a curiosity. High Chancellor Velmar of the Eldinar had remarked during the council session debating Earth's application for membership. Imagine maintaining military vessels when there has been no significant conflict in the galaxy for over 12,000 years. The human ambassador, Dr. Elena Reyes, had stood with perfect composure before the council's veiled condescension. With respect, High Chancellor, humanity has learned that peace is not a natural state of existence, but rather something that must be vigilantly maintained. We hope we're wrong. We prepare in case we're right. That had been 20 years ago. Humanity had been granted provisional membership, their battleships tolerated as quaint relics of a more primitive mindset. The elegant Concordat vessels, with their minimal defensive capabilities and crews who had never trained for combat, continued to traverse the stars, secure in the knowledge that the galaxy was, and would always remain, at peace, until the signals came from the edge of Concordat space. Orbital Station Luminous Harmony was the pride of the Tholian scientific community, suspended at the outer boundary of a binary star system in the Perseus Arm. Its primary mission was deep space astronomical observation. Station Commander Xilith was enjoying a meal in his private chambers when the emergency alert sounded, something that had never happened outside of scheduled drills. "Commander," the station's AI interface projected itself before him, its usual golden hue now pulsing in urgent red. Multiple unknown contacts approaching on Vector 227 Mark 43. They are not responding to standard identification protocols. Xilith set down his utensils with deliberate calm. Sensor malfunction. Obviously. Run a Level 3 diagnostic. Diagnostic already completed. Sensors functioning at optimal parameters. Unknown vessels closing rapidly. Their configuration does not match any Concordat registry. For the first time in his 300-year career, Xilith felt a flutter of genuine concern. "Show me." The holographic display shifted to reveal a cluster of objects approaching the station. They were wrong somehow. Not the elegant curves and crystalline structures of Concordat vessels, but jagged, asymmetrical forms that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. They moved with an unsettling organic fluidity despite their apparently metallic composition. "Contact the nearest Concordat patrol," Xilith ordered, the rhythm of his bioluminescent patterns accelerating with growing alarm. "And alert Earth Embassy Station Delta. Their military advisors might have insight on these anomalies." That last command would prove to be the only reason anyone would ever know what happened next. The unknown vessels accelerated suddenly, covering the remaining distance to Luminous Harmony in seconds rather than the minutes the station's systems had calculated. There was no communication, no warning. The lead object, a twisted, elongated shape like a metallic thorn, simply extended what appeared to be a proboscis that punctured the station's outer hull as easily as if it were tissue paper. The station's cameras captured everything. The systematic destruction of life support systems, the methodical slaughter of the scientific personnel, and finally, the creatures themselves. They emerged from their vessels, if vessels they truly were, moving with horrible grace in the vacuum. Their bodies appeared both mechanical and organic, shifting between states as if the distinction was meaningless to them. Where they touched the station's structure, matter simply came apart at a molecular level. Luminous Harmony's final transmission was automatically sent to both the Concordat High Command and Earth Embassy Station Delta before the station itself was torn to molecular components, harvested by the unknown entities with terrible efficiency. Admiral Victoria Reeves reviewed the footage for the third time, her weathered face illuminated by the holographic display in the secure briefing room of Earth Embassy Station Delta. Beside her, Ambassador Julian Chen watched with undisguised horror. "My God," Chen whispered. "The entire station, 400 researchers, gone in minutes." 7 minutes and 22 seconds, Reeves corrected, her voice clipped and professional. "And the Concordat response?" Chen swallowed hard. "They dispatched a diplomatic delegation to investigate. The Celestial Harmony and 2 escort vessels." Reeves snorted. "Escorts? Pretty ships with ceremonial defense screens and crews who've never fired a weapon in anger. They're sending them to confront those." She gestured at the frozen image of the metallic entities tearing apart the station. "The Concordat doesn't have warships, Admiral. You know that." "We do," Reeves stated flatly. She turned to her communications officer. "Signal the ESS Thunderchild and her battle group. They're to proceed at maximum speed to the last known coordinates of Luminous Harmony. Full combat alert." Chen's eyes widened. "Admiral, you can't. The treaty clearly states that Earth's military vessels may engage in emergency response to any direct threat to Concordat citizens or installations." Reeves finished for him. "I'd say this qualifies. The Concordat Council hasn't requested intervention because they're still in emergency session debating the proper diplomatic approach to what is clearly an existential threat." Reeves cut him off. "By the time they finish their deliberations, these things could tear through a dozen more installations. The Thunderchild and her group are the only combat-ready vessels within reach. And if the Concordat objects, we could lose our membership." Admiral Reeves looked at him with eyes hardened by decades of command decisions. "Then we lose it. But I won't stand by and watch civilians be slaughtered when we have the means to intervene." She faced the communications officer again. "Send the order. And alert Earth Command that we may be facing a first contact scenario gone catastrophically wrong." The 3 Concordat vessels approached the debris field that had once been Luminous Harmony, their external lights painting the scattered fragments in soft golden hues. On the command deck of the Celestial Harmony, lead diplomat Farrell of the Eldinar conferred with his science advisors. "Life signs?" he asked, his 4-fingered hands moving in delicate gestures that conveyed concern beyond his calm vocal tones. "None, lead diplomat," the senior scientist replied. "But our sensors detect unusual energy patterns throughout the debris field. They appear to be active in some manner." Farrell considered this with the measured thought process of a being whose natural lifespan encompassed multiple human centuries. Perhaps automated systems that survived the station's destruction. "Broadcast our peaceful intentions on all standard frequencies." What happened next unfolded with a terrible symmetry to the destruction of Luminous Harmony. The unusual energy patterns coalesced into the same twisted metallic forms. They arrowed toward the 3 Concordat vessels with the same preternatural speed, the same horrific purpose. The Celestial Harmony's external cameras captured the destruction of its escort vessels, elegant ships simply coming apart under the onslaught of whatever weapons or processes the metallic entities employed. Within minutes, they turned their attention to the diplomatic vessel itself. Farrell stood on his command deck, dignity intact even as panic erupted around him. "Continue broadcasting peaceful intentions," he instructed. "There must be some way to communicate." The deck beneath him buckled as something breached the ship's hull. The entities poured in, flowing, shifting masses of what appeared to be living metal. Where Concordat crew members attempted to flee, they were enveloped and simply unmade, their cellular structures disassembling before Thurl's eyes. As the entities advanced toward the command deck, Thurl made a final log entry. They appear unable or unwilling to communicate. They consume rather than destroy. May the Concordat find wisdom in our. The log ended there, but the Celestial Harmony's distress beacon continued to transmit tactical data for another 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Long enough for approaching ships to receive it, long enough to see what they were facing. Not long enough to make any difference to the ship's doomed crew. Captain Maya Rodriguez of the EFS Thunderchild studied the tactical display with the focus of a predator sizing up dangerous prey. The data from the Celestial Harmony's final minutes told a grim story. Whatever these things are, they're not interested in talking, she murmured to her XO, Commander David Okafor, and conventional defenses seem ineffective against them. The Concordat ships barely had what we consider defenses, Okafor replied. Glorified navigation shields, minimal point defense. They were sitting ducks. Rodriguez nodded. We're not. Battle stations. Bring all weapons systems online and deploy the Aegis defense grid. Alert the Valiant and the Defiant to form up in theta pattern. The Thunderchild was an Earth Fleet dreadnought. 1 kilometer of armored hull, layered defense systems, and enough firepower to reduce a small moon to rubble. The Concordat had viewed such vessels as embarrassing anachronisms, tolerated only because of humanity's cultural attachment to martial symbols. Now, as the massive ship and its 2 destroyer escorts accelerated toward the expanding debris field that had been the Concordat diplomatic mission, that anachronism represented the only hope for countless lives in the path of the metallic horror. Multiple contacts, same profile as those that attacked the Concordat vessels. Tactical Officer Lieutenant Wei announced. They're altering course to intercept. Let them come, Rodriguez said, her voice icy calm. Activate the Thunderchild's full sensor suite. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. Energy signatures, material composition, radiation output, everything. They'll know we're scanning them, Okafor cautioned. Good, Rodriguez replied with a tight smile. Let's see how they like being analyzed instead of doing the analyzing. The metallic entities accelerated toward the Earth vessels, moving with the same predatory grace they had displayed in the previous encounters. But this time, instead of finding helpless prey, they met something altogether different. The Thunderchild's forward batteries opened fire first, hypervelocity railguns hurling depleted uranium slugs at appreciable fractions of light speed, followed by salvos of plasma torpedoes and directed energy weapons. The space between the opposing forces erupted in a symphony of destruction that would have been beautiful if it weren't so deadly. For the first time, the metallic entities encountered resistance. Several of the smaller objects simply disintegrated under the Thunderchild's onslaught. Others seemed to absorb or deflect the incoming fire, their forms shifting and adapting even as they pressed their attack. They're learning, Lieutenant Wei called out, her voice tight with tension. Adjusting their approach vectors to minimize exposure to our firing solutions. Tactical intelligence, Rodriguez noted grimly. These aren't mindless automatons. Helm, execute evasive pattern Delta 3. Engineering, divert auxiliary power to forward shields. Let's show these things what a real warship can do. As the Thunderchild and its escorts engaged the unknown enemy in the first true space battle the galaxy had seen in 12 millennia, a realization dawned on everyone watching. Humanity's outdated fixation with military preparedness might have just saved the Concordat from annihilation. But as more metallic entities emerged from what appeared to be folded space at the edge of the system, it became clear that this was merely the opening salvo in a war no one had anticipated, except, perhaps, the species that had never forgotten how to fight. The price of peace. Shields at 43% and dropping. Commander Okafor reported, his voice level despite the chaos erupting around them. The Thunderchild shuddered as another barrage of energy, if energy it truly was, slammed against its defensive barriers. Captain Rodriguez gripped the arms of her command chair. Reroute power from non-essential systems. Maintain firing pattern Alpha. The tactical display told a grim story. For every metallic entity they destroyed, 3 more seemed to emerge from the strange spatial distortions at the system's edge. The Valiant was already heavily damaged, its port weapon arrays dark and silent. The Defiant maintained its protective position, its point defense systems creating a spherical web of intercepting fire that kept the smaller entities at bay. For now, Captain, Lieutenant Wei called from her station. I'm detecting unusual radiation from the largest entity. It's scanning us, but on a quantum level. Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. They're learning our defenses. Tactical. Prepare to execute Protocol Omega. Okafor turned sharply. Captain, Omega protocols haven't been field tested outside of simulations. And we won't get a better test case than this. Rodriguez cut him off. They adapt to conventional weapons too quickly. Time to show them something unconventional. She opened a secure channel to her sister ships. Valiant, Defiant. Execute covering maneuvers. Draw their attention for 30 seconds. The Thunderchild is initiating Omega. Deep within the dreadnought, systems that had been dormant since the ship's commissioning hummed to life. Earth fleet had developed them based on theoretical physics that they had deliberately kept from the Concordat, not out of malice, but from the certainty that such knowledge in the hands of beings who had forgotten the concept of war would be dangerous. Omega systems online. Chief Engineer Commander Reza Karimi reported from engineering. Quantum field stabilized. We can maintain the effect for 20 seconds before risking core breach. That's all we need, Rodriguez replied. Target the largest concentration of hostiles and execute on my mark. The Thunderchild's hull began to glow with an eerie blue light as exotic particles rushed through conduits never meant to be used outside of the most desperate circumstances. The metallic entities seemed to sense the danger. Several broke off their attack on the Valiant and Defiant, reorienting toward the dreadnought with alarming speed. They know, Okafor murmured. Somehow they know what we're about to do. Too late to stop us, Rodriguez said grimly. Mark. For a brief moment, space itself seemed to hold its breath. Then reality. Fractured. There was no other word for it. A sphere of distorted spacetime erupted from the Thunderchild's specially modified forward emitters, expanding outward at relativistic speeds. Where it touched the metallic entities, they simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but removed from normal spacetime altogether. In the command center, displays flickered and died as the massive energy expenditure overtaxed the ship's systems. Emergency lighting cast the bridge in a red glow. Omega effect dissipating, Karimi reported, his voice strained. Core temperature critical but stabilizing. As the main displays gradually returned to life, a stunned silence fell over the bridge. Where dozens of the metallic entities had been, empty space now yawned. The spatial distortion at the system's edge had collapsed, cutting off the arrival of reinforcements. Did we win? Someone asked in the silence. Rodriguez studied the tactical display. Not one. Bought time. She turned to communications. Status of the evacuation ships. Concordat civilian transports are clearing the system, Captain. The Defiant is escorting them to the jump point. And the Valiant. A pause. Heavy casualties, ma'am. They're operating on emergency power, but their drive core is stable. Rodriguez nodded, relief flickering briefly across her features. Signal them to withdraw with the civilian ships. We'll cover their retreat. Captain, Okafor said quietly, gesturing to a secondary display. Look at this. The remaining metallic entities, still numbering in the dozens, had ceased their attack. They hung in space, maintaining distance from the Thunderchild, their forms pulsing in patterns that seemed almost communicative. Lieutenant Wei's console suddenly lit up with activity. Captain, I'm detecting a concentrated tachyon burst directed at our communications array. It's It's a signal. I think they're trying to talk to us. Rodriguez exchanged glances with Okafor. After they slaughtered hundreds without a word. Run it through the Xenoling protocols. Maximum security filters. Let's hear what they have to say. The bridge speakers crackled with static before resolving into a voice that sounded like metal being torn. A harsh, grating sound that nonetheless formed recognizable words. Worthy. Fight. Consume. Rodriguez's expression hardened. Open a channel. Channel open. This is Captain Maya Rodriguez of the Earth Fleet ship Thunderchild. You have attacked peaceful installations and murdered civilians without provocation. We demand your immediate withdrawal from this system. There was a pause before the response came. No peace. Only storage. Weakness is consumed. Strength is respected. Understanding dawned in Rodriguez's eyes. They're predators, she said quietly to her officers. They don't recognize peaceful intentions, only strength or weakness. The Concordat ships never had a chance because they didn't fight back effectively. So what do we do? Okafor asked. We can't maintain this standoff forever. The Omega system needs at least 48 hours to recharge, and our conventional weapons barely slow them down. Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The entities maintained their distance, but their positions suggested they were preparing for another assault. One the damaged Thunderchild might not survive. We need reinforcements, she decided. Signal Earth Fleet Command. Priority Alpha. And she hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. Contact the Concordat Council. Tell them exactly what we're facing and what we need from them. Okafor raised an eyebrow. Do you think they'll listen now? They'd better, Rodriguez replied grimly. Because this is just the first wave. Something tells me there are a lot more of these things out there, and we're going to need every ship we can get, warship or not, to have any chance of stopping them. The emergency session of the Concordat High Council was unlike any in its 12,000-year history. Gone were the measured debates and philosophical discussions. Fear hung in the air like a physical presence as the holographic feed from the Thunderchild played in the center of the chamber. High Chancellor Velmar of the Eldinar stood motionless, the light refracting through his crystalline form dimmer than usual, a sign of deep distress in his species. These entities, they destroy our vessels without even attempting communication, he asked, though he had already watched the footage multiple times. Ambassador Elena Reyes nodded grimly. They appear to recognize only force, Chancellor. Captain Rodriguez's analysis suggests there's some form of predatory species that targets what they perceive as weakness. And they perceive our peaceful approach as weakness, Velmar concluded, his tone hollow. Yes, but the Thunderchild's resistance gave them pause. They're communicating now, albeit in limited fashion. Delegate Jean of the Tholians leaned forward, his normally iridescent exoskeleton dull with shock. You understand what this means. In our quest for perfect peace, we have left ourselves perfectly vulnerable. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber, alarm, denial, and the first stirrings of a long-dormant emotion for many of the elder species. Anger. Chancellor, Ambassador Reyes continued, Captain Rodriguez requests immediate assistance. The Earth Fleet is mobilizing, but the nearest reinforcements are 3 days out. The Thunderchild and her remaining escort cannot hold the line alone for that long. What assistance could we possibly provide? Velmar asked, gesturing helplessly. Our ships are not designed for combat. No, Reyes agreed, but they're fast, maneuverable, and equipped with the most advanced sensor arrays in the galaxy. We don't need you to fight. We need you to coordinate. Your ships can act as observers, relaying tactical data to our combat vessels. And your shipyards? Yes. Velmar prompted when she hesitated. Your shipyards can be retooled. The Concordat's matter synthesis technology is centuries ahead of ours. With your facilities and our designs, we could produce defensive systems for your worlds in a fraction of the time it would take us alone. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For 12 millennia, the Concordat had prided itself on having moved beyond warfare. Now they were being asked not only to acknowledge its necessity but to participate in it. Finally, Delegate John spoke again. We once believed that maintaining weapons of war was a sign of barbarism. We pity humans for their inability to set aside their martial nature. His compound eyes fixed on Ambassador Reyes. We were wrong. Your species remembered what the rest of us chose to forget, that peace is not the absence of threats, but the strength to face them. High Chancellor Velmar straightened to his full height, his crystalline form beginning to pulse with renewed luminescence. The Concordat hereby formally requests Earth's military assistance in this crisis. Further, we offer full access to our shipyards, our resources, and our technical expertise in support of the defense of all our peoples. Ambassador Reyes bowed her head in acknowledgement. On behalf of Earth, I accept. Together, we stand a fighting chance. More than that, Velmar said, his voice firmer now. Together, we will remind these predators why even the most peaceful beings should never be taken for granted. 3 days later, Captain Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the Thunderchild, watching as the impossible unfolded before her. A Concordat construction vessel, nearly 3 times the size of her dreadnought, hovered in space nearby, its matter synthesis arrays blazing as they produced components that were immediately shuttled to the damaged Earth fleet ships. Beside her, Tholian engineer Delegate Crix supervised the process, his manipulator appendages dancing over a holographic interface. Your armor compositions are fascinating, he commented. Primitive in some ways, yet elegantly functional. We've improved the molecular bonding by a factor of 12 without adding significant mass. Rodriguez smiled faintly. Humans have always been good at breaking things and putting them back together stronger. A useful skill, it seems, Crix replied, without the condescension that would have been present just days ago. Her communicator chimed. Captain, this is the bridge. Earth fleet reinforcements have arrived, along with the Concordat technical vessels. On my way, she responded. Turning to Crix, she added, it seems we're about to find out if our combined efforts are enough. The observation deck's viewport adjusted to show the space beyond the repair zone. Earth fleet ships, cruisers, destroyers, and another dreadnought moved into defensive formations. Among them, gliding with graceful precision, were dozens of Concordat vessels, their elegant forms now housing Earth-designed sensor packages and communication arrays. As Rodriguez made her way to the bridge, she passed repair crews composed of both humans and Concordat species working side by side. The initial awkwardness had given way to efficient cooperation born of shared purpose. On the bridge, Commander Okafor relinquished the command chair as she entered. Status report, she requested. The metallic entities, the science teams are calling them devourers now, have been holding position at the edge of the system, he informed her. Their numbers have increased to approximately 200. They appear to be waiting. For what? Based on their energy signatures, Admiral Reeves believes they're gathering strength for a major assault, but they're also transmitting something. Complex quantum-level signals directed outward, beyond the galactic arm. Rodriguez felt a chill. They're calling for reinforcements of their own. That's the working theory. The good news is that the Concordat's quantum physicists think they've identified the method the Devourers use to cross vast distances. It's a form of space folding we've never encountered before. Can they block it? Okafor's expression brightened slightly. Better. They think they can disrupt it, create a quantum barrier that would prevent additional hostiles from entering this sector. But it will take time to deploy, and the existing Devourers would still need to be dealt with. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. So we need to hold the line here while the Concordat builds this barrier. How long? 72 hours, minimum. 3 days against 200 of those things. Rodriguez mused. Then she straightened. Well, we've faced worse odds. The tactical display updated as Earth Fleet's battle groups took position, incorporating the Concordat vessels into their formations in ways that maximize the elder species' technical advantages while protecting them with human warships. Admiral Reeves is requesting to speak with you, Captain. Communications reported. The main view screen shifted to show Admiral Victoria Reeves, her weathered face set in determined lines. Captain Rodriguez, the Thunderchild and her crew have done exemplary work holding the line. You've earned the right to withdraw for full repairs. Rodriguez shook her head. With respect, Admiral, we started this dance. We'd like to finish it. A brief smile crossed Reeves' face. I thought you might say that. Very well. The Thunderchild will take position as the centerpiece of Battle Group Alpha. Your experience against these devourers is invaluable. Thank you, Admiral. My crew won't let you down. As the connection ended, Rodriguez turned to face her bridge crew. Human faces looked back at her, alongside a handful of Concordat officers who had volunteered to serve as liaisons. 3 days, she said simply. We need to hold for 3 days against an enemy that adapts to everything we throw at them. It won't be easy. It probably won't be pretty. But we're fighting for something worth protecting. Not just Earth, not just the Concordat, but the very idea that different species can coexist in peace. She paused. And sometimes, protecting peace means remembering how to fight. Commander Okafor straightened at his station. Battle Group Alpha reports ready, Captain. All hands to battle stations, Rodriguez ordered. Let's remind these devourers what happens when they mistake peacekeepers for prey. As the red alert klaxons sounded throughout the Thunderchild, Rodriguez settled into her command chair, her eyes fixed on the approaching metallic horde. The coming battle would reshape the galaxy regardless of its outcome, either as the beginning of a devastating invasion, or as the moment when the oldest civilizations in the galaxy relearned the most ancient of lessons, that peace is not merely the absence of war, but the will to defend what matters most. Either way, humanity would stand at the forefront, not because they loved war, but because they had never forgotten its necessity in a universe that was as beautiful as it was dangerous. Weapons free, she commanded. Let's show them what Earth and the Concordat can do together. The sky ahead erupted in fire as the battle for the galaxy's soul began in earnest.